Hi everyone, welcome to the 102 Hours YouTube channel. Tonight we're going to talk about the story of Lori Vallow Daybell, the mysterious mother and a family shattered by darkness. You probably won't survive this. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Go ahead and post your location and local time in the chat so we know you're really here. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Case name: the Vallow Daybell Doomsday Murders, concerning Lori Vallow Daybell and her two missing children. It is told in a second-person, present narrative style. Are you ready? Let's begin. You stand on the edge of dusk in Rexburg, Idaho, where the air tastes faintly of juniper and forgotten dreams. A single street lamp flickers like a failing heartbeat, casting long shadows that dance across cracked asphalt. It reminds you of the Black Dahlia case in 1947, when Los Angeles streets were haunted by the echoes of unsolved horror, and you feel that same creeping dread here tonight. In the heartland of America's doomsday fringe, your footsteps echo. As you approach a modest yellow house, its paint peeling in layers, like the lies layered over the truth. Inside, the silence hangs heavy, broken only by the soft hum of a refrigerator in the back kitchen. You imagine the clink of bottles, the rustle of ritual pages, because this isn't just any suburb. It's the epicenter where a mother's faith twisted into something lethal. A mainstream historical fact floats in the back of your mind. The Lindbergh baby kidnapping in 1932 shocked a nation into fearing monsters in every neighbor's backyard. Tonight, you feel that same paranoia crawl up your spine. Because here, too, the innocence of children is under siege. You press your ear to the door, and it's then you recall a fringe tidbit. Lori once told a close friend she believed her children were destined to be zombie warriors in the coming apocalypse, their flesh animated by divine power. It sounds absurd, almost laughably, except it wasn't joked about in hushed Ramsey County group chats. It was deadly serious down inside. You sense rituals half performed, a circle of salt drawn on the floor, candles snuffed out and stained with crimson wax that could be anything, but you shudder, because the last time you saw such markings was in a case file about occult killings from the 1980s. It makes your pulse flicker. You cross the threshold, the door clicking shut behind you like the snap of a trap. The furniture feels too new, the windows to clean, as if someone scrubbed away any sign of living warmth. A single photograph on the mantel shows Lori's eyes dark, calculating, staring straight into yours. Investigators still question whether those eyes hid genuine grief or something far more sinister bubbling beneath the surface. Your breath hitches when you notice a child's shoe half buried under a sofa cushion, scuffed and small. You imagine two tiny souls padding across the yard, chasing some unseen phantom. The thought twists your gut. You run your finger along the tread, a brand you've seen in photos of Tylee Ryan's last known outfit, the same boots that disappeared. Along with her in September 2019, a gentle whisper brushes your ear, though there's no one there. It's the creak of a floorboard, or perhaps the memory of a father's final plea to the court. Find my kids. Your skin prickles as you recall that plea was publicized alongside the Zodiac killings in 1969 to strangers in time. Yet bound by the same visceral horror that children could vanish into thin air, you edge toward the kitchen archway, where a cookbook lies open to a recipe for angel biscuits. It seems benign until you notice handwritten notes in the margins. verses from Revelation, warnings of defiled bloodlines, and children called back from the dead. You close the book, feeling the weight of someone's delusion pressing down on you. Every true crime aficionado knows that house arrests, restraining orders, and divorce filings can be as telling as any murder weapon. Lori's legal history reads like a grim checklist: multiple failed marriages, custody battles, and ominous restraining orders breadcrumbs on a path that ended in blood. As you follow the hallway toward the bedrooms, your flashlight beam catches a small shrine, ceramic figurines of angels arranged in a crescent, their faces chipped. Around them, dried flowers that once meant hope now look like sorrow, petrified. You inhale, detecting a faint metallic tencopper perhaps, or something more primal. You pause in the doorway of a child's room. The walls, once painted bright yellow, have been overlaid with crude symbols in charcoal. The mattress sits bare, springs exposed, like an empty promise. You feel the room breathe, as if it's waiting for what? You're not sure. A mainstream true crime fact pulses through your mind. In 1983, the McMartin preschool trial showed how fear and rumor can spiral into chaos decades later. You realize the same patterns repeat. Community mistrust, fringe theology, children caught in the crossfire. Your throat goes dry when you spot a torn piece of notebook paper pinned above the pillow. The words "See the Unseen" scrawled in jagged letters. You run a fingertip over the ink. It smears like blood. Just then, the refrigerator clicks open by itself, and you step back as its light spills into the gloom. Inside, only a single can of soda stands upright, condensation forming a circle on the shelf below. You feel as though you're being watched, the silence thick enough to taste. A single line of dialogue echoes in your mind from countless documentaries. She smiled at me like I was already dead. You shiver, knowing you're in a place where reality and nightmare blur. You turn to leave, but the front door won't budge. Panic surges as you remember. This is no accident. Whoever planned this nightmare made sure to lock every exit. Outside, the street lamp flickers again. You can almost hear onlookers whispering across decades. This kind of evil, it's not supposed to happen here. Your heart pounds as you read the words scrawled in chalk on the doorstep. Children belong to me. Now, the darkness isn't just outside, it's behind your eyes. Breather, take a slow breath. You still have only glimpsed the first piece of this puzzle. You edge toward the threshold once more. Knowing the real horror hasn't even begun, you step back into the muted glow of your living room, the fan's soft whir lulling you into a half dream. You settle deeper into your chair, the notebook on your lap, waiting for the next unsettling revelation. You inhale, tasting faint traces of sandalwood from the candle you lit moments ago, and attempt to soothe nerves you didn't know were so frayed. You travel back in time to a quieter moment in Lori's life, before the tragedies, before the courtrooms, before the bodies and whispers. She was, by all accounts, an earnest seeker. You almost admire her earnestness, that old-world thirst for spiritual truth. But in second-hand anecdotes, you hear the turning point, a dusty warehouse in Arizona, where she attended her first end times prophecy circle. Candles flickered around cracked leather chairs as a silver-haired medium spoke of world-ending calamities. A mainstream true crime fact settles in your mind, uneasy as a stone in your shoe. In 1969, Charles Manson convinced his family to commit gruesome murders under the guise of sparking an apocalyptic race war. That gruesome manipulation of faith sent shockwaves through America and formalized the word cult in headlines across the globe. You can almost hear the echo of that terror in Lori's story, as though history is playing a vinyl record scratched. With despair, you close your eyes and imagine Lori's voice, calm but urgent, describing the day she decided to embrace the medium's message. "The world doesn't end with fire," the speaker had intoned. "It ends with the blood of the innocent rising to meet the wicked." You feel a shiver because somewhere in that warehouse, a spark caught in Lori's heart and she carried it forward, through marriages and court dates, until it ignited. Investigators still question whether Lori's visions were sincere or manipulative. Was she a true believer, desperate for meaning in a world of legal filings and restraining orders? Or did she harness that language of apocalypse to bend others to her will? You lean forward, brushing a lock of hair behind your ear, sensing the room contract around you as you consider both possibilities. She carried those beliefs back to Idaho like a secret seed, planting them in family gatherings and late-night phone calls. Friends recall her suddenly obsessed with angel numbers on license plates, convinced these were coded messages from God. She would pause the car mid-conversation, point at a passing truck, and insist that 1313 meant a shift in cosmic balance. You picture her pale face, lit by dashboard lights, eyes shining with fervor, as though she's deciphering the universe itself. But fringe theories don't bloom in isolation. They require water. Enter Chad Daybell, the retired funeral home owner whose fringe theology was already well brewed. You remember a historical note. In 1978, more than 900 members of Jim Jones's People's Temple died in Jonestown, driven by a promise of utopia and a single man's vision of salvation. You feel the weight of that awful career warning as you consider how two like-minded souls can amplify each other's delusions. She met Chad at a bookstore, signing for his self-published apocalyptic novels. You see her hovering at the back of the room, clutching a worn paperback titled End of Days and Beyond. You sense her pulse quicken when Chad read aloud a passage about celestial warriors rising from the graves to fight demons. In that moment, two worlds collided. Her hunger for prophecy and his talent for prophecy peddling. Quirky detail. Lori later claimed she and Chad once performed a midnight ritual in the lava tubes of Oregon, hoping to pierce the veil between worlds. They allegedly left behind a handwritten chant on a cavern wall, promising to restore the dead to hallowed purpose. You almost laugh at the absurdity, till you realize how easily such stories slip from cult lore into dangerous reality. You follow Lori's path through hushed video chats, where she shared visions of cosmic fire and zombie warriors. She believed her children, JJ and Tylee, were destined to be resurrected after their demise, transformed into holy fighters in a final heavenly battle. You feel a cold, knot tighten in your chest at the thought of a mother imagining her own children as instruments of war. Her ex-husband filed for divorce in 2018, citing her obsession as a core issue. In the court documents, he noted her refusal to seek psychiatric help, preferring instead to immerse herself in apocalyptic prophecies and unverified radio broadcasts about supernatural sightings. You imagine Lori lying awake at night, headphones on, scouring the farthest corners of the internet for confirmation of her beliefs. Investigators still question whether that refusal was born of faith, or fear whether she truly believed she could save souls, or whether she feared losing control of her narrative if she ever admitted to doubt. You sit with that question, letting it settle like dust in the lamplight. You move through the timeline, from heated arguments over bedtime prayers to whispered gatherings at remote cabins. Lori's circle shrank until only the most devoted remained friends, who worshipped her charisma, ignoring the red flags. You sense the irony. Community cut off so tightly that no one could see the rot spreading inside. Mainstream true crime lore teaches that cults often thrive in isolation, like Jim Jones in Guyana or David Koresh in Waco. You recall Koresh's Branch Davidians holed up in Texas until federal agents stormed their compound in 1993. The result was an inferno that consumed hopes and lives alike. You feel each remembered tragedy as a pulse in your skull, a reminder that extremism rarely whispers, eventually screams. Lori's beliefs were never yelled in the street. They unfolded in whispers over midnight phone calls and tiny text messages marked urgent. You imagine her frowning over her phone's glow, typing verses from Revelation alongside. Grocery lists ingredients for a casserole, followed by instructions for summoning angels. Quirky detail: during one sermon-style Zoom call, Lori paused mid-speech, looked off camera, and mouthed the words, "He's here." Participants reported hearing distant footsteps, though the recording captures nothing. You feel the hairs on your arms rise, wondering what she thought she heard. Now, you trace her trajectory back to that warehouse in Arizona where everything began. You feel the old warehouse's drafty chill, as if you're standing there again, candles sputtering, voices low and urgent. You wonder, did Lori stand there pleading for divine intervention, or did she relish the power that came with prophecy? Investigators still question whether her faith was a vessel for genuine spiritual yearning or a performance designed to ensnare the vulnerable. You exhale slowly, letting the question hang in the air like a tapestry half-woven. Your breath catches when you memory. Probe another oddity: Lori's fascination with bloodlines. She once told a friend she believed her DNA was marked by ancient prophecy, that her children carried the key to humanity's redemption. That belief underpinned every decision she made from that point on. You lean forward, imagining that twisted logic: protect the chosen blood at all costs, even if it means cutting ties with the living. A shiver slides down your spine. You rise from your chair, stretching limbs that feel suddenly too heavy. The quiet hum of your fan suddenly sounds ominous, as though it's masking an unseen generator powering some clandestine ritual. You know the roots of Lori's path grow deeper than laws or courtrooms. They sprouted in the fertile ground of fear, faith, and the mortal desire to outrun death itself. You sit back down, heart still reverberating, ready to chase the next thread of this tangled tapestry. You step into Lori's world of cracked relationships, where love frays at the edges and every hope seems stained by suspicion. You watch her first marriage unfold like a slow-motion car wreck. She wed Charles Vallow in 2001, a stocky, easygoing man who thought he was rescuing a lonely soul. Instead, he found himself tangled in midnight phone calls, odd gatherings, and whispered worries about unseen enemies. A mainstream true crime fact settles in your mind. In 2002, Susan Smith famously cried crocodile tears on national television as she blamed a carjacker for the drowning of her 2 sons, only to later confess she'd driven them into a lake herself. That case exposed how a parent's public grief can mask something far darker hidden beneath the surface. By contrast, Lori's sorrow was quiet, disturbingly so. After 2 years of marriage, Charles filed for divorce in 2003. Court records note her paranoid delusions and odd late-night rituals, rumors of salt circles drawn around the yard to ward off government witches. you feel the chill of isolation settle over their once sunny Glendale home, as though toxic vines of mistrust have crept into every corner. Investigators still question whether Lori ever truly loved Charles or used marriage as a shield for her growing obsession. With Apocalypse Prophecy, she resurfaced in 2004 with Joseph Ryan, known to friends as Tom, a former police officer who thought he could anchor her erratic energy. For a time, it seemed to work. You imagine family picnics where Lori laughed and her two children, Tylee and JJ, chased bubbles across emerald lawns. But soon, her focus shifted from scraped knees to cosmic conspiracies. She began homeschooling Tylee, citing educational contamination in public schools. You close your eyes and picture her in the kitchen. Textbooks spread like tarot cards, teaching history lessons through the distorted lens of her apocalyptic fervor. A quirky tidbit drifts into view. Lori once refused to let JJ carve a pumpkin on Halloween, insisting that the holiday opens a portal for evil spirits. She made him wear a protective amulet taped under his shirtanact that left the boy confused and a little frightened. By 2010, whispers of cult influence began to swirl. Neighbors recall Lori hosting candlelit gatherings in her garage, the air thick with the scent of frankincense. Her closest friends described her preaching that Tylee was destined to lead an army of angelic warriors after the world collapsed into chaos. You shudder, imagining the little girl clutching a Bible at dawn, her wrists smeared with purple marker from ritualistic blessings. Tom filed for divorce in early 2012, citing Lori's refusal to seek mental health care and her growing estrangement from her children. In court, he detailed late-night sermons delivered via Skype. Lori's eyes glazed as she repeated passages about blood moons and chosen bloodlines. You can almost hear the frantic tapping of keyboard keys as Lori scrolled through Doomsday forums at 3 a.m. Searching for confirmation she wasn't alone. Investigators still question whether those sermons were genuine spiritual outreach or a manipulative script to control everyone around her. Divorce papers went through, and you sensed the relief Tom must have felt until Lori vanished with Tylee and JJ in September 2019. You peer through the courtroom transcripts, she told police. She'd left the children with grandparents for a divine assignment, but no one had seen them since. You imagine Tylee's green eyes wide as she clutched a backpack, unaware of the storm she was walking into, and JJ toddling behind in his little sneakers, trusting his mother's calm voice. A mainstream historical fact flickers behind your eyelids. The Menendez brothers in 1989 infamously betrayed their parents, leading to one of the highest profile familicides in US history. That betrayal's horror still lingers because family bonds should be unbreakable, yet they can twist into instruments of destruction under the right or wrong conditions. Lori's next move was shocking. She changed her name to Vallow, claiming a spiritual rebirth, and legally severed Charles's name from her children. She sent conflicting texts to loved ones, one moment pleading for prayers to protect her kids from dark cultists, the next dismissing concerned calls as satanic interference. You feel the tension coil in your chest at the thought of Tylee calling a grandparent, her voice trembling, asking if monsters really lurked in the night. Fringe details surface. Lori once painted her living room walls black, saying it absorbed negative energy. She scattered crystals in every corner, assuring onlookers they acted as shields against government surveillance. Yet she refused to let anyone touch or move them, not even her own mother. You imagine the silent frustrations building behind every forced smile, the suffocating atmosphere of a home-turned temple. Investigators still question whether the crystals were meant as protection or as ornamental keys in Lori's elaborate power play. By late 2019, formal complaints flew. School officials reported unexplained absences. Pediatricians flagged developmental delays in JJ's checkups, and relatives filed for emergency custody. All attempts were met with Lori's smooth deflections, counseling sessions cancelled, pleading notes scribbled on dusty legal pads, and always more promises that my children will return when the prophecy is fulfilled. A subtle narrative. Transition lets you catch your breath. The frantic chessboard of custody battles and legal filings starts to blur. You step back and see the bigger picture. A mother's devotion warped by unhinged faith, fracturing every tie she ever had. Your pulse steadies as you realize the true fracture wasn't just in the law or the courts. It was in the human bonds that held Lori's world together. The fractures echoed in every empty chair at Thanksgiving, every missed birthday party, every unanswered voicemail. You close your eyes, imagining Tylee's sketchbook left behind on a battered desk, pages filled with unicorns and doodled hearts, untouched by the darkness that swallowed her. You picture JJ's small stuffed dinosaur, its fabric frayed from constant hugging, now abandoned on a dusty WINDOWSILL. Breathe, let those images rest for a heartbeat. Remember, this family's fractures cut deepest in absence, not violence. You open your notebook again, pen poised for the next revelation. The fractures in Lori's family ties weren't just ruptures, they were the first cracks in a facade that would soon shatter completely. You stand on the sidewalk under a late summer sun that feels unbearably heavy, as if even the sky is pressing down on the small cul-de-sac in Ammon, Idaho. The air shimmers over asphalt, and tumbleweeds of dried leaves cling to curbs like silent witnesses. You hear distant sirens, muffled through a haze of cicadas, and your throat goes dry. September 2019, when a mother's calm cracked and 2 children vanished. You trace the faded yellow police tape fluttering in a lazy breeze. That hush, it lingers. The world seems paused, waiting. You slip past uniformed officers and a clipboard-clutching reporter, heart hammering as the missing persons flyers scroll her children's faces in black and white dot. In 2007, 3-year-old Madeleine McCann vanished from a Portuguese resort, igniting one of modern crime's most enduring mysteries. Her disappearance taught the world how quickly innocence can slip through cracks in daylight. You remember that case's raw, public grief, the ocean breeze that carried CNN cameras to sunlit balconies. Tonight, you understand how a quiet town can erupt into chaos when children go missing. You feel that same dread twisting your gut as you peer at the faces on every lamppost. Their eyes seem to follow you, pleading through glossy lamination. You swallow, realizing how ordinary days can shatter into nightmares at a single frantic phone call. You follow the timeline in your mind. Lori's calm voice on the telephone at dawn. She reported that Tylee, 15, and JJ, 7, were asleep at their grandparents' home just down the road. You picture her words. They're safe, staying for a sleepover. But when officers arrive, an empty house greets them. No giggles echoing down hallways, no morning chatter over cereal bowls. You can almost taste the stale coffee left cooling on a kitchen counter. Chairs pushed back from a bare table. A single backpack lies open on a couch, its contents scattered like breadcrumbs. A half-sipped notebook, a crumpled snack bar wrapper, a lone sock. The hush deepens. Quirky detail. Lori once told a neighbor she'd hidden Tylee and JJ in a remote survival bunker complete with oxygen tanks and canned peaches, until the darkness passed. You shiver, imagining mile-deep tunnels where sunlight never reaches, and a mother's voice echoing off concrete walls. In your mind, you see JJ clutching a flashlight, Tylee's hair laced with dust motes. The idea seems ludicrous yet also disturbingly plausible when seen through the lens of fanaticism. You wonder, was it shelter or prison? That bunker rumor spread through hushed group chats, morphing into feverish speculation before police could confirm anything. Investigators still question whether Lori's narrative was protective fiction or deliberate obfuscation. Was she shielding the children from real harm, or simply spinning a web to cover their trail? You watch detectives cross-reference phone records with her text logs, each tap echoing like a metronome counting down to truth. They track her movements to a storage unit on the outskirts of Rexburg, where she rented space days earlier. You feel the tension coil inside you as you imagine those silent hallways, rows of rusted doors, a lone fluorescent bulb flickering overhead. Every creak and shuffle in that darkness could hide a terrible secret. You slip into the Ryan children's bedroom, now empty and echoing. The walls, once painted with unicorns and rainbows, stare back with chipped pastel ghosts. You trace your fingertip along a windowsill where Tylee once laid out dolls, now vanished. A half-dressed doll prays in the corner, its porcelain hands raised in silent hope. Breath catches in your chest. Breather, let that image dissolve, then inhale softly, before stepping deeper into the silence. Across town, a local news crew corners Lori outside a grocery store. You feel the camera lens pinning you like a phantom victim. She smiles with eerie composure, her voice hushed yet unwavering. My babies are under God's protection. We will be reunited, she promises, eyes fixed on the horizon. You hear laughter rustle from behind the camera persona, nervous chuckle lost in the hum of digital recorders. You taste the grit of dust on your tongue as you watch her turn away, silhouette haloed by the midday sun. That comet feels like a dare. You join the search party at dusk, helmets high beam cutting through thick brush on the outskirts of town. The air smells of pine needles and urgency. Volunteers call names into the twilight, voices trembling under the weight of unanswered questions. You snap photos of missing persons posters plastered on Tristali's bright smile beside JJ's mischievous grin. Laminated rectangles fluttering in the breeze. Drones hum overhead, casting ghostly spotlights across tangled undergrowth. Every rustle stirs hope and dread in equal measure. You realize how quickly community solidarity can bloom and how shattering it is when it yields no answers. Late that night, you hover by Lori's phone records in the precinct's break room. You feel the hum of fluorescent lights seeping into your bones. Detectives study route logs, timestamp after timestamp, visits to grandparents, to storage units, to cell tower pings in foreign towns. The pattern skitters like an insect across. A map frenzied, unpredictable. She may have used burner phones to cloak her trail or diverted signals with a mobile jammer. You scrub at your temple with fatigued fingers, tasting the metallic tang of coffee and weary doubt. Outside, crickets herald midnight. Inside, you hear only the echo of unanswered questions. You step back onto your porch, chilled night air wrapping around you. The echo of children's laughter feels like a dream from another life. Flyers rustle beneath your feet as you twist a lock of hair round your finger, heart hammering. You know disappearance is the worst kind of cruelty. Siblings torn from arms, voices silenced without a trace. yet you feel a glimmer of resolve stir in your chest. You must follow every lead, read every log, pry open every bunker door. By dawn, you'll chase the whispers that might lead you out of this labyrinth of fear and into the light, or deeper into darkness. You slip through the braided shadows of Chad Daybell's home office, where the air smells faintly of old paper and candle soot. A single lamp casts a pool of golden light on a cluttered desk strewn with spiral-bound manuscripts. You run your fingers across the cracked leather cover of his self-published novel, End of Days Rising, and feel the grooves of each embossed letter. A mainstream true crime fact hums in the back of your mind. In 1997, 39 members of the Heaven's Gate cult in California committed mass suicide, believing they would board a UFO to the next level. A gruesome testament to how apocalyptic prophecy can turn devotion into tragedy. You shiver, wondering what drew Chad's readers into his world of celestial battles and final reckonings. You notice how effortlessly his charisma fills the room. You imagine the swirl of his brown hair as he rises from a velvet-topped chair to greet visitors at the bookstore. His voice warm, professorial threads through apocalyptic sermons. On YouTube, stitching a fellowship of viewers who feel they've glimpsed forbidden truths. You can almost hear the gentle cadence of his tone. The veil is thin, he would whisper, and soon the dead will walk among us. You lean forward, sensing why so many felt compelled to send him money for private readings. On the desk lies a neatly typed calendar marked with scribbled annotations. June 12th, Lake O, The Woods Ritual, and July 3rd, Midnight Seance. He wrote at least 8 novels between 2014 and 2019, each one weaving angels, demons, and resurrected warriors into apocalyptic landscapes. He sold them at local fairs and online, cultivating a devoted following who believed his fiction was prophecy in disguise. You pick up a single page, the edges curled and yellowed, and read a line etched in his elegant hand: "When the bell tolls thrice, we shall rise." A quirky detail flickers in your mind. Chad once claimed he heard voices of the departed whispering through the walls of his funeral home late at night. He told a neighbor he'd taped small microphones behind headstones to capture the mourners' final messages, experiments that earned him a reputation for mixing science, spectacle, and the supernatural. You almost laugh at the image of him crouching behind a gravestone, wires trailing like ghostly tentacles, until you remember how fringe beliefs can stalk the border of madness. Their first encounter felt like celestial planning. You picture Lori slipping into a crowded Salt Lake City bookstore in August 2019, the hush of patrons turning her entrance into a drumroll. Chad stood at the front, reading a passage about the final harvest from his latest manuscript. Her pulse quickened when he spoke of chosen bloodlines and the coming rapture of the righteous. You sense her thrill as his gaze swept the room and settled on her face, eyes locking like magnetic compasses. They talked for hours afterward, leaning close in a back corner by dusty shelves. He handed her a signed copy. "To Lori, fellow warrior May, we stand together." You imagine her fingers closing around his inked signature, her heart pounding as though a veil had lifted. You wonder if she felt the same free song of destiny that so many of his followers described, an electric promise of purpose in a world gone grey. As days passed, their meetings multiplied. You trace her footsteps to the town library, where they pored over dusty tomes of Christian eschatology. You can almost hear his low murmurs as he read aloud snippets from obscure theologians, punctuated by the soft rustle of pages. Outside, rain pattered against arched windows, syncing with your own quickened heartbeat. In those moments, you sense their visions intertwining. Two fervent minds constructing a cosmos where only they held the map. Investigators still question whether Chad's writings were sincere prophecies or marketing ploys designed to amass power and wealth. You step back into the night air, and the lampposts on the street gleam like distant stars. You feel the weight of his theology pressing against your ribs, a doctrine woven from fear, hope, and the promise of resurrection. Lori carried his words into every hushed conversation that followed, repeating his verses as though they were gospel rather than fiction. You picture them side by side at a secluded cabin retreat, candles arranged in pentagrams of salt, reading aloud from the End of Days series under a canopy of whispering pines. His books found their way into her hands like a lifeline. You realize the tragedy isn't just that two people fell under the sway of dark prophesied, but that their meeting fused two volatile worlds into a single, unstoppable force. You close Chad's manuscript with care, aware that each page you've touched was a step on the road to unspeakable choices. You slip through the sliding glass door of the small rented cabin north of Rexburg, the dusk light fading behind you. Inside, the air tastes of cedar and unsaid promises. A single lantern burns on a folding table, illuminating two open books. One, Chad's latest manuscript teeming with angelic hierarchies. The other, Lori's scroll-filled journal, margins thick with fevered notes. You sense the weight of their shared obsession settling on your shoulders like a suffocating cloak. Together, they fashioned a theology drawn from half-read sermons and borrowed apocrypha. Their shared vision was a tapestry woven with threads of revelation and fringe radio broadcasts about thin veils between worlds. In hushed tones, you overhear Lori insist that the earth trembles before the chosen arise, while Chad traces a trembling finger over a map marking ancient ley lines beneath Idaho soil. Their eyes meet bright with conviction, and you realize they believed themselves architects of a coming cosmic reckoning. A mainstream, true crime fact flickers through your mind. In 1995, followers of Om Shinrikyo released sarin gas in Tokyo subways, killing 13 and injuring thousands, one of history's most chilling examples of apocalyptic belief turned mass violence. You feel the parallel. How obscure doctrine, when left unchecked, can metastasize into atrocity. The memory presses against your ribs, a warning pulse beneath every ritual enacted in this cabin. As you move toward the corner, you notice a whiteboard, covered in interlocking circles and arrows. Children equals key reads one arrow. Another points from resurrection to heavenly army. Below, an index of colors: purple for purity, red for blood covenant, and black for veil piercing. You trace the lines with your fingertip, feeling dizzy at how carefully they mapped their theology like a military campaign. This wasn't casual faith, was strategic war planning in spiritual disguise, quirky detail. Lori and Chad once performed a midnight angel pancake ritual in a nearby park, mixing pancake batter with almond oil and reciting invocations, before flipping each cake as an offering to fallen spirits. They believed the sizzle would crack open the boundary between life and afterlife. You almost laugh at the absurdity, till you recall that grain and oil were ancient mediums in early Christian rites. In their hands, even breakfast became sacrament. You step back, noticing a recording device perched on a tripod. A scratchy audio file plays softly, Lori's voice, urgent and tremulous, describing a vision of her children clad in luminous armor, walking through fields aflame. Chad's voice underlies hers, calm and measured, reciting verses from obscure passages of the Apocalypse of Peter. Their voices overlap like two halves of a single prophecy. You shiver as you realize these aren't private confessions. They're rehearsed sermons intended for an audience of unseen believers. Investigators still question whether these recordings were open-minded explorations of faith or manipulative tools to recruit followers and bind Lori's children to a predestined fate. You pick up a brittle pamphlet titled "Heed the Call, a Guide to Spiritual Resurrection," credited to the Circle of the Chosen. Inside, hand-drawn diagrams show souls ascending through concentric rings, each guarded by angelic sentinels. Marginal notes in Lori's handwriting mark Day 7, Children's Vigil, and Day 12, Bloodline Purification. You flip past pages that outline a final ritual, the binding of flesh to spirit, promising eternal life for those deemed worthy. Your pulse quickens as you imagine how she might have interpreted those instructions for her own blood, beyond the hymnals and handouts. The cabin's walls bear scratch marks like claws scraping at hidden doors. You press your palm to the rough wood and feel a faint tremor, as if something beyond your senses is stirring. A breath of air skitters across the floorboards. You remind yourself, this room is a crucible where obsession ferments into action, and you're only here to observe. A mainstream historical note rises unbidden. In 1979, the Order of the Solar Temple executed a series of mass murders and suicides across Europe, convinced they would be reborn on a distant star. Their demise showed how apocalyptic zeal can drive believers to fatal extremes. Standing here, you sense how every scribble and chant in this cabin could tip the balance from belief to bloodshed. On the table's edge lies a tattered ledger filled with expense receipts, purchases of gasoline, camping gear, and hundreds of candles. The total costs over $10,000, tells a merciless story. No expense was spared to prepare for the end. You turn the pages, noting dates and locations. Grand Teton sighting, Snake River ceremony, Lost River eclipse. Each entry is a waypoint on their apocalyptic pilgrimage, a breadcrumb trail toward the moment they believed they'd command life and death. You lean close to a stack of printouts, chat logs from a private Telegram group titled Chosen Remnant. Scrolling through, you glimpse followers praising Lori's divine daughters, offering to volunteer as spiritual sentinels. One message reads, "I stand ready to sacrifice for the Daybells." You feel a cold spike of dread. These aren't fringe fans. They're willing accomplices in a doctrine that sanctifies sacrifice. Investigators still question whether the group's complicity extended beyond virtual devotion, whether shadows among those followers crossed from prayer into collusion. You step toward the cabin door, pausing at the threshold. Behind you, the lantern's glow flickers, as though uncertain if it wants to reveal more. You inhale the mingled scents of beeswax, pine, and something metallic. It could be blood, it could be rust. You close the door softly, knowing the vision you've witnessed is both rare and perilous. Outside, the moon has risen, pale and distant. The cabin sits silent beneath its gaze, a silent oracle of secrets too vast for daylight. You stand in the gravel, heart still racing, realizing that the real horror lies not in what you've seen here, but in what they believed would come next. You slip back into the hush of post-funeral halls, where flowers wilt and quiet condolences hang in the air like dust motes. The scent of lilies cuts through stale air, and you realize you're here not to mourn, but to piece together a mosaic of death that refuses to make sense. This is where the bodies stack up. A husband felled by family feud, a brother-in-law in a single car crash, and a stepmother claimed by a sudden illness, and all under the same warped theology. A mainstream true crime fact drifts into your mind, unsettling as bare earth. In 2013, Casey Anthony was acquitted after her daughter's death, and the nation recoiled at how superficially a mother's grief can be displayed or feigned in the courtroom. Tonight, you feel that tension between public sorrow and private calculation as you trace the timeline of Vallow Daybell fatalities. Burst Charles Vallow. It's July 11th, 2019, and you stand outside his doorway, the amber porch light casting a halo around the scene. Charles's brother, Alex Cox, answers the door with blood spattered across his shirt. He claims he shot Charles in self-defense during a domestic dispute. You imagine your own pulse stuttering at the word self-defense, because in true crime, that phrase often masks something darker. Investigators still question whether Alex's story of a gun wrestled away in a moment of panic and withstand that forensic reconstruction on that sun-baked Idaho afternoon. Later that September, Alex himself dies in a single vehicle accident. You find the wreck on a deserted stretch of highway, under a sky bruised with storm clouds. His pickup is shredded, headlights staring blankly skyward. Witnesses claim a deer ran into the road, but you taste the metallic temps of doubt on your tongue. It reminds you of the 1984 death of actor Bruce Lee, officially ruled cerebral edema. Yet whispers of foul play persisted for decades. Mystery lives in those gaps between cause and certainty. Quirky detail. Lori later claimed she received a premonition, a message from beyond, warning her that Alex's death was necessary to protect the bloodline. You shiver at the image of her eyes alight in that sterile hospital hallway, whispering ritual verses over his ventilator. It's absurd, and yet you know cult leaders often cloak vengeance in prophecy. Tammy Daybell's death arrives next. On October 19th, 2019, you slip into the morgue's quiet chamber, where her body lies wrapped in white linen. Tammy was found in her bedroom, reportedly dead of natural causes. But you catch a faint chemical scent, peach-colored lotion mixed with something acrid, almost vinegary. It pulls you back to the 2018 poisonings of the Smythe family in Ireland, where innocuous cosmetics concealed lethal toxins. A mainstream historical fact. True crime lore notes that cosmetic poisoning dates back to the Roman Empire's love of lead-based makeup. And the pattern hasn't truly disappeared, this just evolved in subtler guises. You hover at the foot of the table, examining Tammy's peaceful features. Residents in her small town described her death as sudden and inexplicable. No prior complaints, no apparent illness. You note the coroner's report. Acute pulmonary edema. Clinical, clean, yet you sense the omission of toxicology details. Investigators still question whether Tammy's symptoms were misattributed and whether key samples vanished before the report finalized. Quirky detail. In the days after the funeral, Lori replaced Tammy's gravestone inscription with a cryptic verse she'd scribbled on a cocktail napkin. She sleeps now until the chosen return. You cringe at the carved letters, as though she'd claimed Tammy for some future resurrection ritual. You can almost see Lori's hand guiding the chisel in the moonlight, each stroke a vow to rewrite fate itself. Next, you trace the death of Mark and Melanie, siblings of Chad Daybell, who reportedly succumbed to a mysterious illness in late 2018. The obituary reads, untimely passing, but you taste the acrid bitterness of missing details. A single newswire clipping mentions flu-like symptoms, but no one recalls any outbreak. It's as though they evaporated, leaving only eulogies and hushed condolences. You remember the 1997 death of John Benet Ramsey, officially accidental, yet forever shadowed by conjecture. In that case, uncertainty fueled legends. Here, it fans the embers of suspicion. Investigators still question whether those deaths were coincidental or signal a pattern of orchestrated loss. You step into a half-lit den, where family photographs line the walls. You pause at a portrait of Tammy and Chad, smiling in sun-dappled ivy. A small plaque beneath reads, "Together until the stars fall." You feel a pang this shouldn't have been their elegy. Childhood snapshots of Tylee and JJ scatter across a side table, faces frozen in play. You imagine Lori's gaze narrowing as she passed those smiles for something she believed only she could unlock. Quirky detail: Lori was rumored to have installed secret cameras in her own home, hoping to capture spectral presences, footsteps of departed loved ones, whispers of departed spirits. You picture her replaying grainy footage of empty hallways at 3 a.m., convinced she saw Tammy's silhouette drifting past the kitchen. She told a neighbor she needed proof that the bloodline lives on. You return to your notebook, pen scratching. As you compile the anomalies, 3 deaths, 3 narratives bent by fear and faith. The pattern forms a constellation, and you trace it with your fingertip. Each star promises revelation or concealment, but you know revelations often arrive cloaked in irony, and concealments in plain sight. A mainstream true crime fact hums. In your mind, in 1991, American cult leader David Koresh's Branch Davidians surrendered to federal agents, and the subsequent siege ended in flames that claimed over 80 lives. From that tragedy, investigators learned how charismatic figures can sanctify violence. Violence and death becomes the final testament of devotion. Here too, you sense devotion twisted into catastrophe, a theology that consecrates each death as a sacrament. Investigators still question whether Lori and Chad viewed their loved ones as casualties in a divine war rather than human beings to be cherished. You close your notebook, the pages fluttering like captive wings. The silence in the house falls heavy as a shroud. Outside, a lone cricket chirps, reminding you that life persists even in the shadow of death. You breathe in the night air, tasting both relief and dread. Breathe, settle your thoughts one last time. In the coming days, you'll confront evidence and testimony, searching for the moment when faith crossed the line into irredeemable violence. But for now, you stand amid the bones of broken families, aware that every death here was more than an ending. It was an invitation to question what power truly claimed their souls. You arrive at the Rexburg Police Department before dawn, the parking lot slick with dew, and the fog curling around squad cars like spectral tendrils. Inside, uniformed officers confer around digital maps displaying cell tower pings. You trail your finger along the route Lori traced on her phone, from her storage unit appointment to Chad's property and back again. The room hums with unspoken urgency, the low murmur of radios intercut with the clack of keyboards. Your heart pounds as you realize that every keystroke could crack or shatter the case. You watch forensic technicians skulk through evidence bags filled with Lori's burned CDs containing audio journals. A mainstream true crime fact surfaces. In the early 2000s, the FBI's forensic use of digital metadata was revolutionized by the BTK killer case, where hidden EXIF data finally linked Dennis Rader to his crimes. You feel that same flicker of hope as technicians coax data from Lori's device's fragments of her cryptic chants. Location logs, and private messages that police believe tie her to her children's disappearance. Your eyes trail to a whiteboard listing warrants, one for the storage unit, another for Chad's property, and a third for Lori's social media accounts. The deputy points at a scribble: children's remains. Search for personal effects. You suppress a shudder. You're at the cusp of probable cause. Detectives share theories about a clandestine bunker under the Daybell home, but no one's willing to admit how far they might dig. Quirky detail: Lori once ordered bulk shipments of empty vinyl cylinders, claiming they were ancient scroll replicas that would protect her. Prophecies police found dozens crammed behind her garage wall when they executed the search warrant. You blink at the mental image of ghostly parchment fluttering in dusty corners. At midday, SWAT vehicles roll onto Chad's 5-acre property. You glimpse armored officers flanking a camouflaged lav as they breach the perimeter. Drones hover. Overhead, there were a dissonant soundtrack to the unfolding raid. You can almost taste the charged air-rich footstep crunching gravel under heavy boots. The authoritative bark of commands pulsing through bullhorns. Meanwhile, in Boise, the news crew's helicopter slices through the sky. Your screen splits between live footage of the raid and Chiron updates of Lori's history text. Overlays listing restraining orders, custody hearings, and warnings from child welfare officials. The media circus forms a ring around the scene, flashbulbs firing like artillery. You hear the anchor intone in his corporate baritone. Authorities close in on Utah. Cult leaders linked to child disappearances. The words feel cold, clinical, and you sense the distance between public spectacle and the delicate humanity at stake. Investigators still question whether the timing of the raid just days after Tammy Daybell's exhumation gave them enough actionable intelligence, or if pressure for progress accelerated the operation before they had a full picture. You slip back to the precinct basement, where Lori's seized journals lie on a steel table. Their soaked, burned pages crackle under latex gloves. You sift through pages of indigo ink, finding passages about the hidden chamber beneath the east wing and keys of blood. The scribbles match diagrams from Chad's cabin, linking the two conspirators in arcane shorthand. Every scrap of writing feels like a breadcrumb, leading you deeper into the labyrinth of belief and betrayal. Later, you watch interview footage of Lori's neighbor testifying at a grand jury hearing. She describes Lori's late-night gatherings, culminations of chanting and candlelight that set off faint tremors in the floorboards. The neighbor recalls seeing Lori drag heavy tarps across her living room floor, perhaps to conceal evidence, perhaps to sanctify ground. You lean into the screen, your pulse thrumming like a metronome, as hours of recorded depositions scroll by in the background. As dusk falls, the forensic team emerges from Chad's home, boxes in hand. Blue tarps flap on the lawn, marking spots where cadaver dogs alerted. You inhale the damp evening air, carrying the stench of overturned earth. Your eyes flit to a stack of plywood and tent poles assembled in the backyard. Police believe these were parts of a makeshift altar for the ultimate ritual in the command tent. You glimpse the detective captain's weary face. He runs a hand through graying hair and admits in a low tone, the community's faith in us is on the line. We either find those kids or we've failed. His words hang between you like a verdict yet to be delivered. You step outside and gaze at the search grid illuminated by spotlights. Volunteers cluster beyond the police perimeter, flashlights bobbing in the undergrowth as they call out names into the night. Candlelight from vigil makers flickers nearby, their murmured prayers a poignant counterpoint to the sharp authority of officers. As you watch the vigil candles under darkened pines, you realize this case is as much about belief as crime. When dawn breaks, the truth will either shine in clear daylight or slip again into the shadows. You step into the makeshift evidence command center, rows of metal tables illuminated by harsh fluorescent panels that buzz like angry insects. The air is thick with the smell of rubber gloves and printer toner, punctuated by the faint, unsettling hint of something metallic, blood perhaps, or rust. You skirt around investigators huddled over laptops, their screens aglow with enhanced images and waveform graphs. This is where the hidden truths start to surface. Peeling back Lori's carefully constructed facade, a mainstream true crime fact anchors you in the present tension. In 2018, detectives used genetic genealogy to unmask the Golden State Killer, a breakthrough that promised to transform cold cases everywhere. You feel that same pulse of excitement here as forensic analysts prepare to apply cutting-edge methods to decades-old debris. Your gaze drifts to a clear plastic evidence bag, labeled Box 27, where a single clump of dark hair catches the light. Beneath it, tiny flecks of red-brown soil from the storage unit floor. You imagine the microscopic technicians magnifying those strands under high-definition microscopes, tracing their DNA back to the children who vanished in 2019. The promise of fate congealing in a strand of hair feels almost holy, or at least as close to divine justice as science can get. Across the table, a video analyst manipulates a blurred security camera clip pulled from a neighbor's doorbell cam. The grainy footage flickers at 30 frames per second. You see a figure in a dark hoodie bending over a pile of plastic bins in the driveway late at night. The analyst boosts contrast, and suddenly the bin's lids swing upward, revealing a spare stroller wheel glinting in the beam of a flashlight. You lean closer, noticing the scrawl of a Sharpie on one wheel, JJ's nickname, Munchkin, scratched in childish loops. Quirky detail. Lori's ex-husband revealed she'd purchased that exact model stroller on the same morning she rented the storage unit, yet she claimed the stroller had been left behind at the grandparents'. You shiver at how someone might peel a child's name onto a stroller wheel as a final taunt. Investigators still question whether that doorbell footage captured Lori alone, or if an accomplice slipped in and out of the frame too quickly to register nearby. A forensic audio specialist adjusts levels on a series of burned CDs retrieved from Lori's backyard fire pit. The discs were thought destroyed, but thanks to advanced recovery techniques used famously in the BTK case where the killer's hidden journals were resurrected from ashes, these audio logs emerged intact. You hear a hiss as the playback crackles. To life, Lori's voice, measured and insistent, reading from a tattered notebook. She recites passages about cleansing bloodlines, interspersed with the squeak of chair legs and distant thumps that could be footsteps or something else. You close your eyes, straining to catch each word. A soft sob echoes beneath her chantand. It isn't her voice. It's the high-pitched whimper of a child, clipped and distant, like a memory bleeding through time. You picture Jay, 7 years old, hoping for bedtime stories, forced instead into a recorded ritual. Your chest constricts at the thought. On a nearby monitor, the video analyst syncs that audio with clips from Lori's phone, camera secret recordings she apparently made of midnight rituals in her own home. The video is abrupt, a shaky view of candlelight flickering across a basement wall scrawled with symbols, then a glimpse of two small boots peeking from behind a storage shelf. You see Tylee's lace-up boots, scuffed and dusty, tiny footprints trailing in wax. The analyst slows the frame, and you note a stain on one boot sole. Dark, coagulated, quirky detail. Someone on Lori's private Telegram channel claimed she once filmed her children as guardians of the ritual circle, dressing them in handmade robes. The prospect of that footage lurking in her camera roll makes your skin crawl. Investigators still question whether the boots belonged to Tylee, or if they were staged to mislead the search efforts. To your left, a pathologist in a crisp lab coat lifts a small evidence tin labeled audio transcripts. Inside are printed waveforms with time codes and speaker identification notes. You skim the transcript. Lori's voice shifts from commanding to pleading, overlaid with a second voice deeper, unfamiliar, issuing instructions like bind the covenant at dawn and no one leaves until the prophecy is fulfilled. You taste the cold metal of dread as you wonder who that second voice might be. A mainstream historical note surfaces. Forensic voice analysis played a pivotal role in the 1996 case of the Unabomber, where FBI phoneticians narrowed suspects through tape recordings. You sense that here, too. Discerning the second voice could crack open an accomplice's identity. Moments later, the lead detective summons you to a digital forensic station where cell tower data has been mapped onto a 3D model of Rexburg. You see Lori's phone pings clustering beyond her grandparents' home, then spiking at Chad's property, and finally fading out near an unmarked gravel road outside town. A red dot blinks like a heartbeat that died too soon. You lean into the map, tracing the trajectory of those signals as though they're the ghosts of footsteps fading into oblivion. Quirky detail. During the investigation, technicians discovered Lori had installed a homemade cell signal jammer in her garage, likely to mask these pings, but left an unshielded antenna dangling in the rafters, creating a weak but traceable signal. You lift an eyebrow at the oversight. Even meticulous conspirators leave threads. Investigators still question whether that jammer was meant to conceal a final rendezvous or simply to buy time for the ritual's dark climax. The command center grows quieter as night deepens and the evidence crystallizes. You stand amid a symphony of screens and scalpels, audio waveforms and soil samples. The data points converge. Hair under a fingernail, video of a hidden basement, audio of chanting children, cell tower trails. Each piece snaps into place like a shard of a shattered mirror reflecting the same grim truth. You close your eyes and imagine the moment when all this science collides with the courtroom, when jurors watch the scratched boot, hear the child's cry, trace the DNA strand. You feel a ripple of anticipation. This is the juncture where belief meets consequence, where ritual meets justice. Breathe, take one final grounding breath. The case is teetering on revelation. When dawn breaks, the hidden recordings and forensic breakthroughs will expose the fissures in Lori's alibi and, with them, perhaps, the path to finding the children who vanished. You step through the heavy oak doors of the Bonneville County Courthouse, the scent of polished wood and stale carpet curling around you like a rehearsal of fate. Reporters line the hallway, their cameras trained on Lori before she even appears, snapping like heartbeats under fluorescent glare. You smooth your shirt and press your palm to the cool marble railing, feeling the echo of every trial that ever gripped the nation. A mainstream true crime fact hums at the edge of your awareness. In 1995, the O.J. Simpson trial transformed courtrooms into arenas, with live broadcasts turning jurors into reluctant celebrities and justice into soap opera. You sense the same electric undercurrent here, as the gallery fills with flashing phones and whispered wagers on Lori's every expression. You drift forward as lawyers bustle past. Briefcases in hand, like loaded pistols. The bailiff calls the court to order in a solemn drone, and you settle into your hard wooden seat, your knees pressing against the bench in front of you. Lori enters, her posture rigid, lips pressed in a faint curve, as though she's auditioning for a part she knows by heart. Her hair is pulled back tight, and she wears a simple navy dress that looks almost too subdued, as if mourning decorum could mask the magnitude of her actions. You study the jurors, their faces framed by slattered light from dusty windows. They're ordinary people, a schoolteacher with silver-rimmed glasses, a retiree in a pastel cardigan, a college student nervously tapping a pen. You imagine how the Menendez brothers' trial in 1993 showed that jurors become actors too, weighed down by empathy and fear in equal measure. This time, these 12 hold the power to decide whether a mother's faith is excuse or crime. The prosecutor rises, voice measured but firm, and you feel the room lean in. He lays out the charges: conspiracy to murder, filicide, and tampering with evidence. You taste the metallic click of gavel echoes as he unfolds each count like a deck of shattered cards. He speaks of burned audio CDs, hidden bunkers, and a theory that this was never about protection but control, a doctrine that demanded sacrifice. You catch yourself gripping the bench so tightly your knuckles blanch. Quirky detail: during a recess, you notice Lori's defense attorney leafing through a handmade scrapbook of her own design pages filled with hymn lyrics. Doodles are protectively circling angel wings and taped in news clippings, praising Lori's devotion to truth. You blink, wondering if those pages were meant to humanize her or bind her more tightly to a narrative of innocence. You lean forward as the defense attorney stands, voice softening the tension. He paints a portrait of a grieving mother guided by unorthodox but heartfelt beliefs, a woman who truly thought she was saving her children from cosmic doom. He presents letters from Lori's family, praising her kindness and devotion. You feel a pang of dissonance. Genuine sorrow can appear on paper as convincingly as guilt. Investigators still question whether Lori's courtroom demeanor, her steady gaze and calm tone, was evidence of sincerity or a practiced performance honed in esoteric vision-casting workshops. You watch as witnesses take the stand. The forensic analyst describes matching soil from the storage unit to hair clippings found on the boots. You shiver as you imagine those tiny fragments of earth that clung like a confession when those boots were buried. The translation of scientific minutiae into human verdicts feels surreal. A lab report becomes evidence of betrayal. A neighbor testifies next. She recounts Lori's late-night chants, overheard through thin walls, droning voices praising the chosen ones. You hear the neighbor's voice crack as she describes the tremors in her floorboards, as though entire rituals were erupting 2 houses away. The court reporter's fingers fly across the keyboard, capturing every syllable. You hold your breath, picturing Lori standing just beyond the witness box, silent and still. You turn to the gallery and notice a cluster of support group members, self-styled spiritual sentinels who wear silver pendants in the shape of angel feathers. They whisper assurances to one another, hands clasped like prayer beads. You recall that in the Waco siege of 1993, Branch Davidian followers wore identical necklaces as symbols of unity, and watch how symbols can morph into rallying cries for the faithful. The judge calls for evidence. Presentation: a series of hidden camera clips seized from Lori's phone. You squint at the grainy footage showing children's boots in a dim basement, voices chanting around them. The room goes utterly silent, as though the walls themselves are straining to hear. You feel your throat constrict, imagining Tylee and JJ frozen in fear while cameras rolled. Quirky detail. You notice Lori's mother in the gallery, clutching a small white stoner, protective talisman she's carried since childhood. She later explains. The stone glints unnaturally under the courtroom lights, like a tiny witness, unwilling to stay hidden. Closing arguments approach. The prosecutor paces, voice rising as he recounts each planning step: gasoline purchases, bunkers rented, manuscripts burned. He paints Lori not as a deluded believer, but as an architect of atrocity. You feel the air thicken, your own pulse, a drumbeat of impending judgment. Then the defense attorney stands, tone lower, softer. My client's heart was always with her children. Every choice, however extreme it may appear, was made out of love, misdirected, not malice. He surveys the jurors, eyes lingering on the teacher with silver-rimmed glasses, the retiree in pastel. You wonder if compassion will sway them more strongly than forensic certainty. You witness the jury file out for deliberation, leaving the courtroom hushed and hollow. Lori stands motionless, shoulders squared, lips barely curving downward. You imagine the weight of months of allegations pressing on her spine, yet her silence holds firm as you slip back into the corridor. The buzz of cameras and murmured questions washes over you. Reporters lean in, their microphones thrust forward like spears of curiosity. You sense the collective eagerness for closure, for truth to emerge from this crucible of ritual and rule of law. Outside, the sky has deepened to night, the courthouse lights casting long shadows across the steps. You pause at the top, inhaling the cool air. You know the verdict looms like a storm cloud on the horizon. Its thunder will reshape every narrative you've followed, every fractured thread you've pieced together. You slip through the heavy oak door marked deliberation room, the hush inside folding around you like velvet. Through the frosted glass window, you watch 12 ordinary faces: teachers, nurses, small business owners clustered around a long table under muted fluorescent light. Their bodies lean forward, shoulders hunched, as though bearing the weight of every decision they've ever made. A mainstream true crime fact settles in your mind. In the 2003 Scott Peterson trial, jurors spent more than 10 hours hashing out whether a fisherman's alibi justified his wife's disappearance, proving that even small details can tip the balance between life and death. You sense that same meticulous scrutiny here, as each juror fingers colored markers and takes notes on laminated exhibits. You step closer to the glass and see juror number 3 tapping a pen against her notepad, the rhythm a quiet drumbeat of anxiety. You imagine the swirl of conflicting emotions: empathy for a mother's grief, horror at the voice-logged rituals, and doubt about how far belief excuses action. The stack of evidence slides between them: photographs of muddy footprints, transcripts of lily-scented audio CDs, and those chilling security camera frames of children's boots. A juror points at a printout of Chad and Lori's cabin whiteboard. Tracing the arrows from children equals key to heavenly army. You watch as Juror 7's brow furrows. He glances at Juror 11 and whispers something you can't quite catch. You sense their unspoken question: when does faith become weaponized? Quirky detail. One juror brought a small quartz crystal into the room. She believes in its calming energy, and now it sits beside her verdict form, gleaming under the overhead light. You almost smile at the irony, a symbol of spiritual solace present while they weigh the fate of a mother accused of apocalyptic sorcery. You imagine sliding into one of the empty chairs, feeling the scratch of worn upholstery beneath your fingertips. The foreperson stands, lifting a stack of note cards. We have to decide if Lori acted out of genuine delusion or cold calculation, she says, voice steady but low. The table falls silent. You can almost hear the collective intake of breath. Investigators still question whether the full depth of Lori's mental state was ever captured in evidence or if key psychiatric evaluations remained sealed under protective orders. The jurors divide into smaller groups. You watch Juror 9 and Juror 2 debate the audio recordings. One insists the child's sob is proof of duress. The other wonders if it could have been manipulated or repurposed for dramatic effect. You sense their struggles, how to interpret science that feels too clinical for the weight of human suffering. A mainstream historical note echoes quietly. In 1992, the Menendez brothers' jury confronted conflicting forensic testimony about shotgun residue, showing how expert opinions can clash and leave jurors adrift in doubt. Here, too, they navigate expert voices, DNA analysts one moment, theologians the next, blurring lines between faith and forensics. Across the table, Juror 5 rereads a transcript of Lori's 3 a.m. Zoom sermons where she promised her children resurrection through bloodline purification. You shiver, imagining the chilling conviction in her voice. He glances at a psychiatrist's report, noting paranoid ideation, but no definitive diagnosis. You lean closer, feeling the tension crackle like a live wire. What if doubt seeds reasonable doubt? Quirky detail, tucked under Juror 5's commentary sheet, is a folded post-it with a doodle of angel wings. A subconscious echo of Lori's own sketches in notebooks seized by police. You feel the uncanny resonance, their pens mimicking her prophecies, even as they consider condemning her. A hush falls as the jurors shift to ballots. The foreperson hands out small cards labeled guilty and not guilty. You watch each hand tremble slightly as it hovers over the choice. The first juror drops a slip into the box, guilty of conspiracy. The second pauses, tears welling, before selecting guilty of filicide. With each card, the pile grows until only a handful of decisions remain. A mainstream true crime fact hums beneath your breath in the Lindbergh baby case of 1932. The jury returned a guilty verdict in under 2 hours, driven by the emotional weight of a lost child, reminding you that jurors can be swept by sentiment as much as by facts. Here too, emotion and evidence wrestle for sway. Investigators still question whether the emotional testimony of Clara Cox, who lost her own daughter decades ago, unduly influenced the jury's empathy and blurred the line between personal grief and impartial judgment. The final card slips into the box. The foreperson closes her eyes for a moment, then lifts the lid. One by one, she reads aloud, "Guilty on all counts." The words echo in your mind like distant thunder. You feel a tremor in your chest, a mix of relief that the ritual plans are thwarted and sorrow for the mother whose faith turned genocidal. You picture Lori waiting beyond the door, her posture locked in composed stillness. You wonder if she felt each syllable like a blade, or if her eyes remained unflinching, sealed behind that enigmatic gaze first glimpsed in her yellow house foyer. As you slip out of the deliberation room, cameras flash in the hallway. Reporters flock, microphones thrust forward, hungry for reaction. You step onto the courthouse steps, where candle-lit vigils have turned into somber celebrations, some holding crosses, others handing out white roses. You feel the community's collective heartbeat, justice reverberating through every hushed amen. In the gathering dusk, you sense the finality of this moment. The jurors have grappled with darkness and emerged with an answer for now. Outside, the night sky holds a promise that even in the shadow of doomsday whispers, justice can shine its light. You step through the courthouse doors into a cavernous hallway where marble floors gleam under fluorescent lights. At your feet, reporters cluster like vultures, microphones extended, cameras clicking. You navigate past them with calm determination, the echo of your shoes magnified in the hush that follows each flash. Overhead, banners advertise justice for Tylee and JJ, while flickering television screens broadcast live feeds of the impending verdict. You press a hand to the cool stone railing, feeling it pulse with collective anticipation. Your heart hammers in measured staccato, each beat counting down to the moment when 6 women and 6 men will decide whether a mother's faith is absolution or condemnation. Breather, close your eyes for a moment and feel the tension ease before the storm returns. You settle into a hard wooden bench, the polished back pressing into your spine. Before you, the jury box stands empty, a silent expectation. You recall a mainstream historical fact. In 2002, Susan Smith was convicted and sentenced to life for murdering her 2 sons, demonstrating how juries often spare women the death penalty but impose the harshest prison terms. Tonight, those lessons weigh on every juror's mind as they ready to confront evidence of unprecedented darkness. The bailiff calls the court to order, his voice resonant. The hush deepens as the foreperson rises and unfolds her notes. You lean forward, elbows braced on your knees, as she delivers the verdicts with crisp precision. Count 1. Guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder. The words land with a dull thud, stirring a tremor in the floorboards beneath you. Count 2. Guilty of first-degree murder of Tylee Ryan. You taste copper in your mouth. Count 3. Guilty of first-degree murder of JJ Vallow. Each syllable feels like a blade carving space in the air, marking fate with finality. Breathe a release a breath you didn't realize you were holding. Lori's face remains unreadable as each verdict echoes. Her shoulders tilt ever so slightly, as if acknowledging an invisible weight, but her lips stay sealed in a calm line. You study her gaze steady, almost meditative, wondering at the gulf between emotion and composure. Investigators still question whether that stillness signified genuine remorse held too deep to show, or a quiet triumph that the world misunderstood her divine mission. When the forensic narrative ends, the judge addresses Lori directly. His voice is solemn. These crimes represent a gross violation of the sacred bond between parent and child. The court hereby imposes life imprisonment without possibility of parole on each count. You feel the words reverberate in your chest like distant thunder. The gavel falls once, twice. The echo rolls across the benches. In that moment, you grasp the enormity of the sentence. A lifetime in fluorescent hallways, metal doors closing. Behind her forever. There will be no parole board, no final appeals only. The steady passage of days, measured in cell blocks and guard shifts. Quirky detail. Observers later noted Lori wore mismatched shoes, one golden sandal and one black loafer. She believed they symbolized the balance of heaven and hell in her prophetic vision. The image of her footwear clicking against courtroom tile became a silent emblem of her fractured reality. You turn to the gallery where grief and shock have carved lines across familiar faces. Tylee's aunt leans forward, fingers digging into the bench's edge as if to anchor herself to this moment. JJ's father sinks against the wall, head bowed, cradling a teddy bear in his arms. Across from them, Lori's small band of believers, self-styled spiritual sentinels, stand in quiet protest, clasping silver feather pendants against their chests as if armor. Whispers ripple through the rows, she was saving them. One murmurs countered by trenchant silence from those who know the truth. The collision of faith and fury here feels like tectonic plates shifting beneath your feet. Outside, the media circus swirls anew. Flashbulbs ignite like staccato stars as cameras pivot and crews jostle for position. You weave through frantic reporters shouting questions. Ms. Vallow, any statement, only to be met with shuttered expressions. A local anchor recounts the verdict live, her tone a blend of solemnity and sensationalism. You see neighbors holding bouquets of white roses and laminated photos of Tylee and JJ, smoothing petals as they wait for the crowd to disperse. The air hums with a dissonance, the quiet dignity of mourning poised against the clamor of breaking headlines. As dusk falls, you follow Lori's transport van as it rolls through deserted corridors behind the courthouse. The engine hums low, windows barred, lights flashing in muted rhythm. You lean against cold concrete as officers guide her through a reinforced door into the county jail. She steps in with slow deliberation, shoulders squared, hands pulled behind her back as cuffs click shut. It's a journey from legal ritual to punitive reality. Each step audible in the silent hallway, like a requiem for freedom itself. Oddly, jail logs later revealed Lori requested lemon lavender tea and a stack of coloring books for spiritual reflection. During her first week behind bars, that she refused any cellmate who spoke ill of her prophetic visions. It's a surreal echo of her courtroom rituals transposed onto prison routines, ink-smeared crayons, instead of audio logs. Mainstream true crime law reminds you that life sentences rarely end silence. In high-security wings, inmates establish rituals, religious services, coded messages, solidarity, oath-seeking order, where walls close in. You wonder how faith, once twisted into lethal force, will adapt to this new containment. Later, you sit in dim lamplight, reviewing your notes. This verdict stands among the harshest in Idaho history, matching the life terms handed to other convicted filicide perpetrators. You ponder benchmarks like the 1995 Oklahoma City bombers' multiple life sentences, each reflecting society's demand for definitive closure. Yet here, the victims are children, innocence violated by a twisted covenant. The case will reverberate. In law reviews, true crime series, and psychological studies examining the boundaries of belief and sanity, you lean back, realizing that while the gavel's sound has faded, its echoes will be studied for generations. You leave the jail's perimeter behind, breathing in the cool night air as you step onto a deserted sidewalk. Justice has been served. On paper, but the deeper sentence will unfold in silent cells, in whispered rumors, and in the fractured hearts of those left behind. The chapter of verdict and sentencing closes now, but the true journey of healing, of reckoning, has only just begun. You settle into your favorite chair, the glow of your laptop screen bathing the room in soft blue light. Your fingers hover over the trackpad as you scroll through trending hashtags. Hashtag Justice for Tylee JJ, hashtag Mother of Doomsday, hashtag Find Our Children, each feed more frantic than the last. The hum of your fan blends with the distant echo of notification pings, a lullaby of collective outrage. You feel the same frisson you'd have on November nights in the 1980s, when television news teemed with warnings of hidden ritual abuse, what historians today call the satanic panic. a wave of moral hysteria that spawned false memories and wrongful convictions across America. The lesson lingers. Sensational headlines can shape minds before the facts even surface. You click into a true crime podcast that dropped an exclusive 2-hour deep dive on Lori's zombie warrior's thesis. The host's voice is low and relentless as he teases each bombshell, unreleased audio of midnight chants, grainy footage of boots in a basement, and a lurid promise that Tylee and JJ were sacrificed for salvation. You sense how easily fear feeds entertainment. Listeners rate the episode 5 stars, praising its unfiltered truth, even though half the details echo rumors overheard on fringe forums. You refresh your feed and catch a mainstream news anchors. Chiron, cults, conspiracies, and child murder. The Daybell case unfolded. Her tone is measured until she lets slip that a secret sect sold Daybell Defender t-shirts on an underground forum, believing Lori was targeted by government psyops. You shiver, picturing midnight sales of cotton and conspiracy. Investigators still question whether the relentless cycle of soundbites and social media uproar drowned out sober analysis of evidence or stoked public anger into a verdict by sentiment. You open a tab for a blog run by a self-described prophecy hacker who claims to have decoded hidden symbols on Chad's book covers, arguing they were summon spells for ancient deities transmitted via social media images. His most recent post dissects the background art of a bestseller, tying it to numerology that predicted the very date Lori was arrested. You almost laugh at the absurd technical prowess required to hide a riddle in cover art, till you remember that in the digital age, even the most outlandish theories can find an audience of thousands overnight. Local news trucks line the courthouse, steps like metallic sentinels, their satellite dishes pointed skyward. You switch channels and land on a round table of legal analysts dissecting every word of Lori's closing statement. One lawyer notes her poetic turn of phrase in describing the apocalypse, while another rails against her cagey tone under cross-examination. You feel the divide between legal nuance and sensational soundbatar fissure wider than any courtroom. Aisle dot outside, vigil goers clutch candles and laminated photos, murmuring prayers that ripple through social media live streams. You see strangers holding hands, united in grief, their voices hushed yet resolute. Across town, a handful of fringe followers dan angel feather pendants and wear t-shirts stamped Daybell Defender, chanting that Lori's conviction was a persecution of the faithful. The duality stings your senses, mourning and mantra, justice and jihad, as the media machine revs into overtime. You reflect on another era of public spectacle. In 1969, the Manson family murders gripped every front page, fueling a cultural crisis of faith in innocence itself. Newspapers printed lurid details by the column inch, and television hostesses whispered about helter-skelter until the phrase slipped into America's nightmares. Tonight, you witness history's reprise. The Daybell case splashed across digital billboards and smartphone screens. Each scroll, another refracted headline. Your heart thumps as you imagine the children's faces ghosting every news ticker. Tylee's bright smile next to JJ's mischievous grin, a poignant counterpoint to the frenzy. You realize the true crime audience isn't just consuming a story. It's fueling the narrative, piece by piece, tweet by tweet. You close your laptop, the screen fading to black. The room grows still, save for the faint spin of your fan and the lingering echo of hashtags. You've borne witness to the roar of public outcry, the clang of conflicting narratives, and the eerie devotion of fringe believers. Now you brace for the next act, the unanswered questions, the disputed testimony, and the legacy of a community forever changed by this media maelstrom. You return to your desk as night falls, the soft glow of a desk lamp carving halos of light across scattered files. Your pen hovers over notebooks filled with timelines and theories. But despite the stack of evidence you've amassed, 1,000 questions still echo in the silence. You feel the pull of each unanswered thread, tugging you toward truths that refuse to settle. You lean back and listen to the hum of your air purifier. Its gentle whir, a reminder that even in stillness, something stirs beneath the surface. You close your eyes and recall the enduring mystery of the Black Dahlia case in 1947. Elizabeth Short's murder left a legacy of clues so tantalizingly close, yet irretrievably lost, spawning whispers and theories that persist to this day. That same ache for closure resonates here, in the hush between your thoughts where certainty should live. You open your notebook to a fresh page and trace the outline of the case's loose ends, the missing audio logs from Tammy Daybell's funeral service, the unaccounted for phone that pinged near Chad's property in October, and the single grainy photo of a hooded figure that vanished from the storage unit camera archive. Each gap feels like a door left ajar, creaking with possibility. What if an unseen witness slipped through? Or what if someone altered the evidence before investigators ever arrived? You run a fingertip down the list of fringe details you've catalogued. Lori's claim that an unmarked van tailed her on the night JJ disappeared. An online follower's assertion that Dee Dee Blanchard's ghost appeared in a live stream chat. And the lurid rumor that Chad once kept a replica guillotine in his yard, hidden behind cedar hedges. You almost laugh at the absurdity, till you remember how cult lore often blurs with reality, each retelling layering new distortions over the original truth. You imagine retracing Lori's final day of freedom, the trek from her grandmother's house to the courthouse, the coffee shop stop where she ordered a vanilla latte she never drank, the turn into the jail driveway captured by a lone dashcam. Yet despite the surveillance, her motives remain veiled. Was she confident in her defense, or resigned to her fate? Did she believe her angel warriors would rescue her in some final act of divine intervention? A mainstream true crime fact surfaces in the Lizzie Borden case of 1892. The accused was tried yet acquitted, leaving the community forever haunted by a crime with no definitive answer. Even today, historians sift through newspapers and diaries seeking clarity. You feel a shiver as you realize how acquittal or conviction can both breed endless speculations, questions that ripple outward, refusing to be quelled. Investigators still question whether key experts were ever able to analyze all of Chad's personal effects. Several boxes arrived from his funeral home days after the official inventory was completed, and some contents were never logged. You picture yourself in the evidence locker, turning over unclaimed items in gloved hands, a decorated matchbox stamped revelations, a faded photograph of Tylee scribbled with chalk symbols, the single rubber boot you once photographed, in the storage unit. Each object holds a story waiting to be told, yet for now they lie mute behind plexiglass. You feel the tension between what you know and what remains concealed stretching taut, like a harp string ready to snap. You recall that detective's weary confession: we hit every logical lead, but the unspoken ones, those buried emotions and hidden alliances, they slip right past us. You close your eyes and feel the weight of his words settle like sediment in your mind, beyond the physical evidence. The human elements still blur the edges. You wonder about Abby, the distant cousin who vanished from a family reunion in 2017. Some say Lori boasted Abby was taken by angelic forces for her kinship with Chad. No report was ever filed, and Abby's name doesn't appear in any docket. Yet you can't shake the thought that her disappearance might be another piece of the puzzle. Quirky detail: fringe bloggers uncovered an archived forum post claiming Abby's name was etched into a hidden panel behind Tammy's gravestone. Local law calls it the Daybell cipher, but no one has ever found the panel. Investigators still question whether Abby's disappearance was ever formally linked to the Daybell circle or quietly dismissed to preserve family reputation. You straighten the stack of folders and reach for your phone, scrolling through bookmarked web pages and legal transcripts. The trial transcript notes a sidebar request by the defense to inspect a collection of blood spatter diagrams, an unorthodox move they claimed was purely academic. The judge denied it. What secrets might those diagrams hold? You trace your thumb over the words academic interest and wonder if it masked something far more personal. A mainstream historical note emerges. In the Amityville case of 1974, residents reported hidden rooms and voice phenomenon only for skeptics to later allege hoaxes and fabrication. The boundary between genuine anomaly and elaborate staging can be razor-thin. Investigators still question whether the diagrams existed at all, or if they were a bluffer strategy to distract or delay the prosecution. As midnight nears, you light a single candle beside your lamp, its flame dancing like a heartbeat in the dark. You lean closer to the glow and whisper over each file. Where were you on that night? Who moved these pieces? What lies hidden beneath the surface? The paper trembles under your fingertips, and for a moment you sense the hush answering. Barker promised that if you keep searching, the next clue may finally slip into view. You close the notebook and stand, the candle's light flickering across your reflection in the window. Outside, the world is still. Somewhere in the night, an owl hoots. You feel the weight of every question settle around you like a cloak, heavy but necessary. The investigation, the narrative, the justice, they persist beyond conviction. The unanswered questions linger, waiting for the day someone follows their edges to the truth beyond the shadows. You return to the quiet street, where the yellow house once stood as a stage for ritual and fear. Now its facade is gone, replaced by a simple lawn and a low stone marker bearing two small bronze plaques, one engraved Tylee Ryan, the other JJ Vallow. You step across a brick path lined with wildflowers, lavender, marigolds, forget-me-nots, each chosen by community members who vowed that beauty would grow in place of sorrow. Ahead, a wooden bench faces an empty swing set, its chains swaying gently in the breeze. You pause, imagining the laughter that once filled this space, and feel the weight of absence settle like dust on neglected toys. A mainstream true crime fact lingers in your mind. After the Columbine High School massacre in 1999, Littleton, Colorado, created the Columbine Memorial, a place where names etched in stone stand among blooming gardens, reminding visitors that hope can rise from tragedy. Here in Rexburg, the Promise Garden serves a similar purpose. Locals donated bulbs and seeds, gardeners coaxed life from freshly turned soil, and volunteers tend the beds each morning before dawn's first light. You inhale the scent of turned earth and jasmine and recognize how collective grief can become collective growth. Investigators still question Whether these memorials heal the deeper wounds of mistrust and isolation, or simply offer symbolic closure, you follow a paved walkway to a small pavilion draped in strings of paper lanterns. Beneath them, a scholarship fund operates in Tylee and JJ's names, awarding annual grants to students pursuing counseling and social work degrees. You leaf through letters from scholarship recipients, some writing of their own childhoods, disrupted by loss, others describing dreams of nurturing safety for vulnerable families. Each note feels like a thread connecting the past's rupture to a future where compassion might outlast cruelty. Across the street, you spot the community center where weekly healing circles meet. Clergy, therapists, and neighbors share stories, in low tones, guiding each other through the terrain of grief. A counselor explains how, in the aftermath of the 1983 Branch Davidian siege in Waco, survivors formed peer-led support groups that became lifelines, because only those who've known terror can truly guide others through its shadow. Here, too, they pass candles from hand to hand, acknowledging that healing is not a solo journey, but a shared commitment. Quirky detail, despite local requests for privacy, true crime tourists still drive by in rental cars, some snapping photos of the memorial from behind chain-link fences, others leaving trinkets like action figures dressed as angel warriors. Town officials now install reflection points with benches and signposts that gently redirect pilgrims toward empathy rather than voyeurism. Investigators still question whether such tourism trivializes the children's memory or helps sustain critical conversations about faith, mental health, and child welfare. You wander past a display of laminated news clippings mounted on a low fence. Headlines about custody battles, exhumations, and trials run parallel to op-ed columns advocating new state laws. In the Idaho legislature, a bill now requires periodic wellness checks for homeschooled children, direct response to the Vallow Daybell case. Legislators cite national precedents after the 2007 case of Nathaniel Brandon, whose child abuse went undetected in a private tutoring arrangement. Many states tightened oversight to ensure every child is seen at least once a semester by a licensed professional. You consider how policy can emerge from tragedy, a bittersweet legacy of precaution born from neglect in the fading light. You approach a low sculpture of two children hand in hand, crafted by a local artist from reclaimed wood. Rain has darkened its grain, and droplets glisten like tears along its carved fingers. You trace the outline of their faces, featureless, yet expressive in their stance. A plaque quotes a poem, "In absence, find our call, to guard each song we hear, to stand as beacons when shadows draw near." You imagine those words echoing not only here, but in every heart touched by this case. You step away from the sculpture, heart stirring with both sorrow and resolve. The community's path to healing is neither swift nor smooth. It is a winding trail of gardens and gatherings, of policy debates and personal reckonings. Yet you sense that, like those blooming flowers, hope can take root even in the harshest soil. The legacy of a shattered family thus becomes an enduring cautionary tale that unchecked belief can fracture the bonds meant to protect the most vulnerable, but that shared compassion and vigilance can mend them once more. You sit on the edge of night, the world outside hushed and still, your shoulders heavy with everything you've seen. A single lantern flickers at your side, its circle of light soft on the floorboards. In this quiet, you breathe in slow, steady intervals, letting each breath be a promise to carry forward the memory of two children lost too soon. The rustle of leaves outside your window becomes a gentle lullaby, reminding you that even in darkness, life continues its quietly persistent rhythm. You allow images to drift away, empty swings, carved plaques, blossoms brushed by dawn's first light, and focus instead on the warmth of your own breathing. You feel each inhale as a tether to the present moment, each exhale as a gentle release of sorrow that cannot and need not define you forever. Indeed, healing is not a destination, but a pathway you walk one step at a time, guided by empathy and the soft glow of remembrance. As you close your eyes, imagine a field of wildflowers swaying under an open sky, petals catching every ray of dawn's promise. Let the colors of those blooms settle in your mind. Lavender for calm, gold for hope, white for peace. In the hush of that mental meadow, know that you are not alone, that communities can weave resilience from tragedy, and that stars still shine above even the deepest shadows. Hold that vision as you drift toward rest, carrying with you the lessons of compassion, vigilance, and gentle courage. Let your heartbeat soften into the rhythm of distant waves lapping against a shore unseen, rhythmic and unceasing. And in that ebb and flow, trust that tomorrow offers a chance to nurture light in unexpected places. Now, dim the world around you, allowing the soft whisper of night to cradle your thoughts. Sweet dreams await beyond this dusk, gentle, soothing, and endlessly forgiving. Sweet dreams.